Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy night.
If I hear Yamo be there one more time, I'm going to Yamo burn this place to the ground.
What do we got here, Cappy?
Fire started, 81st floor, storage room. This is a bad one. Smoke is so thick we can't tell how far it spread.
You boil it all down, what does a man really need? Just a smoke and a cup of coffee.
Welcome to the Boys Who Would Be Critics, the Fires of Passion and Just Plain Fires edition. Today, we'll be discussing Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's new action thrill ride, Skyscraper, and we'll be following it up with a thriller of an entirely different sort, Alfred Hitchcock's psychosexual thriller, Frenzy. My name is Brendan Jones, and joining me this week is not my good friend Damoon, who was away screening his film in South Korea, but filling in is another good friend of mine, filmmaker and DOP Morgana McKenzie. Thank you for being on the show, Morgana.
Hello. It's such a pleasure to be here. I feel like at long last.
Yes, so you just got back from work in Kentucky.
Oh, God. We can say, as long as we don't say I was working in Kentucky.
Oh. You were visiting Kentucky, I see.
I was visiting.
Yep, because the TSA is definitely going to be listening to this.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely.
We can talk about my show if you want.
Yeah, let's do it.
Except, I can't really give the name or any other details, but I can say that it has been 10 months. 10 long months in the scenic art department for a TV show that will be coming out next year on Netflix. We are in wrap-out mode. Tomorrow is literally the last day of shooting.
How do you feel, is my question.
I feel so ready for it to be over.
All the paint fumes have added up to just tired and readiness to be done.
Oh my gosh, there were too many paint fumes. No, it was really good. We were just at the wrap party Saturday, and Catherine and I were the old couple who left way too early and went to bed at a nice, reasonable time. But other friends stayed very late, closed down the place. One of my friends literally wound up at Mary J. Blige's house by the end of it, so good for her.
Wow.
Yeah, she totally knew how to work the room. Catherine and I had a great time, but like I said, we left early, and I was up at 8 the next morning going for a jog.
Just healthy like that. This is also where you plug Goal Guys.
Yes, thank you, because I am doing a fitness challenge, and Damoon never plugs Goal Guys enough. Ironically, this will be the first podcast that gets plugged on Goal Guys, because I have a video coming out sometime early next week. Technically, Cameron has one coming up before, but finally in the video, I will get a chance to plug this podcast, so hopefully, if some of you are Goal Guys fans who are now listening, thank you for being on the for listening and giving us a chance. We will eventually get around to talking about the movies in question, but no, Morgana and I have not chatted in a while, so you're just stuck with us.
No, we haven't. I feel like Brendan and I frequently disappear from each other's lives, but when we reconnect, it's always over great movies and bizarre stories, and this time the great movies are Skyscraper and Frenzy.
Oh my gosh, you beat me to a segue.
I did. I'm so sorry. You can take it again.
I was about to say our interactions are always special, like the career of one Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson.
Oh, I like that segue better. Yes. Mm-hmm. That one.
Okay, I have a question for you, because we have an age difference. Do you know a time before The Rock as a movie star?
No.
Wow.
Yep.
Because I want to say I was 12 years old, 13, when The Scorpion King first came out, which I am quite sure was the very first feature film starring The Rock that came out in wide theatrical release. He played the Scorpion King earlier in The Mummy 2, but this was his movie.
So we saw The Rock as a Scorpion King twice.
Yep. You've only seen The Mummy Returns?
I've only seen The Mummy.
Yeah, no, there's a spin-off called The Scorpion King, but he's a good guy. And it features a completely nude Asian princess who is always strategically covered with her hair covering down over the breasts, but at 12 it leaves an impression.
My question is, did those 2 strands of hair consistently cover her for the entirety of the movie?
For the entirety of that scene, because it involves pulling this large plug of the bathtub, and they wind up shooting down this less erotic waterfall, and in each moment it's either a hand or a set piece that is blocking whatever body part would have given it the R rating. They had a soundtrack coming out to promote the movie that I want to say the feature song of was done by Gobsmack, which is called I Stand Alone.
What?
And it is exactly as good as it
This
sounds.
is where you've lost me. I'm gone.
Gobsmack was like Creed, but not as popular.
Yeah. I think anything named Gobsmack is immediately tanking.
You know exactly who Gobsmack is in the title. Sort of similar to the movie Skyscraper.
Oh, okay.
It's literally, Skyscraper's Die Hard in a burning building.
I was saying to Brendan that immediately after the movie ended, I think this is the next Die Hard, and therefore I think this is the next Christmas classic.
I think the answer is no.
Okay.
In every regard, it is.
He's not the next Santa?
It wants to be Die Hard. It wants to be like Die Hard for young children.
I think I want it to be Die Hard for children.
Yeah. Well, we had children behind us, and they seemed like they enjoyed it.
Yeah.
If you're gonna take your children to see this movie, let them play video games. Just stay at home. They'll probably get more out of it.
Yeah.
This film is just a setup of obstacles and challenges for The Rock to jump at.
They were really loving it, though. At every twist and turn, you heard them go, oh, wow, or no. Like, it was the perfect commentary for this movie.
Because, they haven't seen very many movies.
God.
I mean, that's the reality.
Really setting the bar low.
It's really surprising if you've seen literally 8 films in your lifetime.
We were surrounded by a very diverse group of people. We had a family behind us who just commentated on the entire movie, and then we had an elderly couple to our right who I think they liked the movie. They spent the first few minutes of it trying to understand 3D glasses. That was distracting and overwhelming and beautiful all at the same time. But yeah, it really added to the crazy movie that was Skyscraper. I still don't know what to make of it.
It was really indicative of what you would get at the 4 o'clock showing. The one thing I really did enjoy and take away from the audience was the family behind us was an Asian family. And, I guess hearing their appreciation, seeing a lot of Asian represented characters, the commentary when they started speaking Chinese to back and forth with one another, I enjoyed that. That felt nice, and it personalized the reality of why it's important to have different faces and different voices in the movies we consume as a culture. Skyscraper, in and of itself, I really did not enjoy this movie. It feels like a film that is as good as it has to be, and it always went with the first choice.
I just don't really understand any of it. I don't really understand how it's going to make money. It's not very good. It doesn't have an intriguing premise. The advertisements aren't intriguing.
Well, the premise is what it is, which is The Rock is doing Die Hard in a burning building, and he's got a lot of charisma. And
but why? And the theater was empty. And yeah, it was Tuesday. It was Tuesday at 4 o'clock. But do you think all the people that were there when we were leaving the theater were booming to go in to see Dwayne climb a skyscraper? No.
Regardless, it's not a big hit, and I want to keep that separate from the criticism of the film itself.
Fair.
Because I think there are a lot of good movies that also showed empty theaters.
Fair. Very true.
But on the subject of bringing children to this movie, I don't know what they're supposed to take from it other than 2 hours of occupied attention. There's just not a lot of movie-making magic that I think is going to have any staying power for a young audience and for even just a couple on a date night. I enjoyed Neve Campbell and The Rock, but I was mostly irritated by all of the dialogue that was written between them. But it just felt like a first draft. It felt like they went with the line that they wrote the first time and went, "That's good enough. We don't need to take that second pass." And it's the kind of film that kids watch when they're 17 and go, "I can write movies." When you have this scene where the wife can't figure out her phone, so she's going to her husband, and the dad's catchphrase with his kids is, "Who loves who? Who loves you? Me."
It was really dumbed down. All the dialogue was dumbed down. A lot of the scenes were just Dwayne in a room alone talking to himself and talking about the keys to duct tape and the keys to the next steps in the scene. He would just narrate the movie himself.
There's a lot of narrating in this film.
Yeah, and it's all by Dwayne to himself in the majority of the scenes.
That's a big thing. There's also, in all the early scenes of this movie, just the aspect of how can we convey as much information as quickly as possible to the audience so we can get forward to the next thing. There's certainly no character arcs to the film. The Dwayne character is a good dad at the beginning, has a really bad day, and by the end is still a good dad and a loving husband.
The only way that we knew that Dwayne loved his family was exactly as you said, when he would point to his kids and go, "Who loves you?" And wait, what was even the line? See, I can't even remember. It's not recitable. It's not possible. It's just not going to happen.
I want to say it's who loves who, and the child would say me, and the other side would say me.
And then they would argue about it, and then he'd be like, "Okay, well, I just love both of you equally." And then the mom would be like, "Oh, Dwayne," and then that's it. That's how we know that they all love each other, right? Because that's what makes the perfect American family, is just Dwayne and aggressive screaming between family members.
It brings me back a little bit, and it may be cliche to bring up Jaws, but I just think back to the dinner table scene in that film where the father is slowly noticing as his son is mimicking each of his actions, and the scene follows silently for about 30 to 40 seconds, and then the father says to the son, "Give me a kiss." Why? Because I need it. Which is just finding ways for characters to say "I love you" without saying "I love you." And that's what you get when you do a second draft and you go, "Oh, this is fine, but how can we make it better?" And that feels like it's throughout the movie, like, "Oh, well, what's the first obstacle they could have?" Well, the bridge falls out from under them, and okay, well, we'll just
put a board on it. He does. There's a scene where there are two halves of the bridge, they're both collapsing, and the mom is trying to get to the other side where her son is, and the obstacle is that the bridge that they're standing on is breaking, and the solution is Dwayne going, "Don't worry, I'll hold it together." Yeah. And he stands there, and there are multiple really long close-ups of just Dwayne like wincing as he's just stretching to hold this bridge together. And why? Because apparently we need that. We need to see his grimacing face again.
Well, the movie is just repeatedly set up an obstacle and watch them get across it.
No, it was dumb characters working through dumb situations. As you said, like all the conversations that everyone had were just minimal. I think if you could just look at the word usage in this movie, I think the most frequently used words would be daddy, family, undescribable screaming and noises, and then occasionally another language.
Right.
That's it. That's all this movie was, and then an explosion. But I don't know. Do you think the family behind us, like, do you think those kids went and left the theater and thought, "Wow, now I want to make movies, Dad. Dwayne really just pushed me further in my life. He just gets me."
No. This is poor family. They're just raking on them.
Oh yeah, we're gonna push them far.
I'm sure every family like with young children that goes to has a good time. My expectation is they've all forgotten this movie by next year.
But I didn't even. I mean, in all fairness, I'm pretty brutal about when I don't like movies. Mm-hmm. I'll make it very clear that I just did not have a good time. And yeah, there are worse movies than I've seen than this. It was entertaining at times, but there were totally moments where I just would zone out and think about something else, and then I'd come back. We were still in the same scene. Nothing had changed. They were still having one-sentence conversations.
You can always leave and get popcorn in this movie. Always go to the bathroom.
Oh yeah.
Always understand.
And you did halfway through. You got up to leave and go get popcorn, and I was gonna fill you in when you came back. By the time you came back, nothing had changed.
Actually, I think one of the biggest twists that had happened, but it was one that was pretty easy to figure out. Like, the guy that you expect to be bad turned out was actually bad, and now he's bloody, and we realized the building's on fire. And I just want to say, I don't want to rag on having a cheap thrills movie. I happen to like a lot of cheap thrills movie. I really enjoyed going to see Pacific Rim when it came out in theaters. I know many people who are haters, but I really enjoyed it. But when I go to see a movie like this, I want to see the tools of cinema used in a way where you go, "Oh, wow, that was interesting. That really took work. That was something I haven't seen quite that way before."
Yeah.
And I just want to say I have nothing against families going to see this movie and having a good time. I'm sure my parents will go see this on a date night and have a good time. The problem I have is that we live in an era where film critic consensus is willing to give a film like this a passable grade because it's good enough, because it hits the beats.
Who's saying that this is a good movie?
Oh, this is I think, like, again, like getting the mediocre scores.
No.
Yeah.
Wait. So fill me in on that, because every conversation, because I've told a few people about this. I told them, like, I'm going to go see a Skyscraper. This is happening. Every single person who I've said that to, without fail, has gone, "Why on earth are you going to go see Skyscraper? Why is that happening?"
Well, this is the conundrum of the 60% threshold, to pick on Rotten Tomatoes, which is you have a film that hits enough consensus that is passable enough for a lot of people to go and enjoy it, but isn't special, doesn't have any big moments, doesn't have things that last.
But they don't care about it being special.
No, but what I'm saying is you have a broader spectrum of film critics now who are rewarding movies for playing it safe and being fine, for being passable. This is how Spider-Man Homecoming got up to 94% on Rotten Tomatoes. But it's just like, no, if you're someone who wants to write about films and consider yourself a film critic, then the expectation has to be a little bit higher than that. And this is the thing Damoon and I talked about a lot when we were prepping to make the podcast, which is we want to start having conversations that are more about using the tools of cinema, talking about films with film language rather than just broader cinematic universes, and does this satisfy a 2-hour window of your time? And this movie just doesn't have those moments of cinema.
Right.
Go ahead.
I guess I'm just curious because I went into this podcast not expecting at all to talk about these things in comparison to Skyscraper. I just never anticipated that anyone would ever try and talk about a good movie and if Skyscraper was a good movie. And I guess that kind of adds to what you're saying about film critics these days. And I guess what I'm just curious about is, did you expect a good movie going into this? Like, is that something that you wanted? Or are you hoping to one day see like a Solo or a Skyscraper type movie that does well? Because I personally feel satisfied with having these kind of like bad movies out there. And I feel like that's everyone's guilty pleasure are these types of movies that you kind of go see with your friends and you laugh about it later. But I never expect them to be good.
Well, this brings me back to watching Jurassic World a couple weeks ago, a movie that is flawed in many ways, but also I thought just had some absolutely beautifully crafted moments, both with working with special effects and using practical set pieces within this, because it has a third act where dinosaurs get loose in a giant gothic mansion. And there's just wonderful little moments in that where characters are trapped, ducking behind a statue while a velociraptor is on top scanning around for them, and the camera just holds and you cover it all in one shot. There's a beautiful sequence where one of the dinosaurs literally gets on top of the mansion and like roars and is silhouetted by the moon. And these are just beautiful, lovely moments in what is otherwise just fun summer entertainment. Not to pick on the director of this film, but there's just not a lot of strong visual filmmaking in this movie. Nothing compared to like what it wants to be, which is a Die Hard or Judge Dredd, which came out a few years back and is a really good film about characters trapped inside a building. I think comparing Skyscraper up against films like those reveals the lack of substance that is in this movie, both in terms of characters.
No, exactly.
It doesn't have the visual eye.
It's like, as much as I joke about Skyscraper being Die Hard, like Die Hard is a beautiful movie, and I've seen that movie probably about 4 or 5 times now, and every single time I watch it, there's something new, there's something that I love, and it's a classic, and it's rightfully so a classic, because every single frame, there's something purposeful there, right? And the amount of times that I was watching Skyscraper and just thought, wow, green screen is fun, isn't it? Was just brutal. There was even the whole mirror sequence where they're inside the top of the skyscraper and they're in this big pearl, and it's kind of a really beautiful and cool location where you can see the entirety of the location around them, and it's see-through at times, then every so often there's mirrors. It looked like a green screen. It looked like it was VFX or CGI, and instead of paying attention to the already subpar dialogue conversations between Dwayne and this random Scandinavian dude, I'm paying attention to the pretty crappy CG of mirrors, right? Like, it's very, very simple things that Die Hard made look flawless, just were completely fell through in this movie. And I think that's the reason why it just fell flat for me, and it became really hard for me to even like have a fun time watching this, is because it just was distracting. I just didn't really understand why.
I think there's a real challenge for filmmakers today working in a big studio system to find those great visual moments, or to push for those moments of character in a studio system that's telling you to cut act one and to squeeze in a Nike sponsor here or whatever else. The problem is this film isn't able to do that.
No.
What I almost want to do now is go back and rewatch Scorpion King.
Oh my God.
Because That is a film that I saw at a young age and watched way too many times. So many
Really?
times. Oh yeah, at a young age, yeah. It got me right. It was the movie that I saw right at the right moment. And I'm quite convinced it's not a good film, but I think if I went back and watched it, what I think I would still enjoy is it a film that is shot, to the best of my knowledge, on location and has some real set pieces.
That was shot on location?
I mean, CGI just wasn't what it was. What it is now. So you had to go to these places.
See, and that's the thing, and that's why it makes it bearable, is because it's actually real, right? Like Skyscraper for me maybe could have been a kind of fun movie that I could pull in a friend to watch and get kind of drunk and be like, oh my God, this is great. But I can't because the green screen is so unbearably distracting. But a movie like that, at least it's real, right? At least I'm not picking apart the fact that it looks fake.
And that would have been some of the fun if we had paired this with a 1970s disaster movie where you had to have a lot of craftsmanship in building all the models and scoping out your shots. And not to say that there isn't craftsmanship in working today, but...
In Skyscraper or in movies?
In comparison with working with a green screen when you can barely see what's in the frame.
Right.
But actually I think now they have it set up so you can see a rough outline of what the setting is when you have your actor set up against green screen, so the director kind of has a sense of the visual space they're shooting in. But to compare that against what they were doing in the 70s in a film like, let's say, Airport, where you literally have a 7-foot model of a plane, and you've got to have exactly this kind of lens so it looks real, and you have to set it up from this angle, that angle. That level of craftsmanship and the detail of the model making and whatnot just isn't present today in modern filmmaking anymore.
But wait. I'm going to argue with you on that because I fully believe, like, while I agree with you, I do think it depends on the director. So, and you saw you saw Blade Runner 2049, right?
No, I have not. Actually, I have not seen Blade Runner.
Madam, please, you need to.
I know.
What are we do? Okay, well, anyways, long story short, have you heard of the quote unquote bigatures that they used in Blade Runner 2049?
No, I'm
so
not,
they're miniatures that are basically as tall as us.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And they coined the term bigatures on set because they were so big, and all the kind of sky tracking shots following the ships through Los Angeles, bigatures.
Well, that's
It's real.
what you have.
It was a combination. Exactly. Well, no, exactly, and that's what I'm saying. Where it's like it would totally. Not that Denis Villeneuve would ever direct a movie like Skyscraper, but if that were to happen, maybe we could actually get a good quality out of it. And I guess that's why when going into a movie like Skyscraper, I just kind of immediately look at the director, look at the people behind it, and think, are these artists? Are these people that care? Or are they just people who are trying to make a lot of money with Dwayne?
Well, that is
right?
Like the director of this film is Rushan Thurber.
Who is he?
His previous credits include Dodgeball, We're the Millers, and Central Intelligence. And I think you can run a career arc of We're the Millers was a surprise summer hit.
That was pretty good. I'll give it that.
Apparently, yeah. I think his talent is in doing comedy.
Yes.
Central Intelligence was an action comedy with The Rock and Chris Hart, also a surprise hit, and that kind of set him up to get the keys to do a film of this size. But the actual filmmaking qualities that you would get in a Central Intelligence, We're the Miller, are not the kind of demands you would expect for doing a blockbuster where you're actually able to craft a lot of artwork through it.
That was it's funny that you mentioned comedy because that was the other thing that I really stuck out for me with this movie was the comedy also kind of sucked. And I will be really brutal when talking about this movie, and I feel like you'll kind of be the good cop here. And I'll just continue to bash on it a little bit. But the comedy kind of felt like potty humor. I mean, it was all just really quick one-word jokes and that type of thing. There wasn't really anything clever about it, which was surprising to me because We're the Millers was, I mean, it wasn't amazing, but it was funny. I thought it was good. I'd watch it again. Why not? Mm-hmm. But all the comedy here was really just, oh wow, I can't even reference anything.
And The Rock isn't really, I don't think, very well served by this material. I've never fully loved when he goes full machismo mode. I always prefer when he's doing a bit of what the Arnold Schwarzenegger thing was, where he's subverting the tough guy image, and similar to what he did in Jumanji, I think probably even in Central Intelligence, so I haven't seen it. is present in Rampage, the giant monkey movie.
Well, see, and that's the thing. I'm fine. Like, if I'm going to watch Dwayne in a movie, and I keep addressing him by his first name because I feel like I can, you know?
Best friends.
We are. We really are. Don't doubt me here, Brendan. But I feel like if I'm going to watch The Rock in a movie, it's going to be in something like that, where it's immediately cheesed up, it's immediately fun, it's Dwayne and a big monkey. Why not? But this was just... He was trying to play a good dad, you know? And there's a whole scene where he's effectively kind of having a first day back at the job, and he's acting super nervous, and he asks his wife, like, do I look too professional? Should I lose the tie? And he kind of stumbles through the meeting and fumbles with his backpack because he doesn't know where to walk. And it's like, I'm sorry. All of us in this theater know that this is Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Why are you fumbling over a tie? Why? Stop it. Like, rip off the tie. Do something. I cannot seriously watch Dwayne as an awkward dad. Like, I can't do it. I don't know why he was cast in this movie. I understand that. I mean, it makes sense. Well, no, I know, and I get that. And I get that the movie doesn't get made if Dwayne was in it. But the amount of close-ups that they had in this movie where it was just Dwayne trying to look like a longing, emotional father into a mom's eyes was ridiculous, and it just didn't work for me. It was like, that was why the movie was funny for me. I talked earlier about how the movie wasn't funny. The movie was hilarious anytime Dwayne was like, wow, I love my daughter. Or at the end of the movie when he's, can we spoil things here? I'm not totally spoiling.
No one thinks everyone dies at the end.
Hey, man.
No one.
Everyone dies. No, there's a scene where he cradles his daughter in burning flames, and he says, who loves you? And she goes, me. And he goes, who loves you? Or no, wait, let's backtrack. Let's backtrack here. Whatever it is, it doesn't work. It's just Dwayne crying and cradling his daughter and talking about love. It doesn't work for Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, is the consensus here.
Takeaway being, for any aspiring screenwriters, the worst way to say I love you on film is by actually saying I love you. I have nothing more to say. We have spent almost 25 minutes discussing the movie Skyscraper.
Oh dear. It's gotten heated.
I think it is time we move on. And that is because our next film is Alfred Hitchcock's psychosexual thriller, Frenzy.
Boy, do I have some things to say.
Before we get going, let me just set it up a bit. And I'll say this movie has no recognizable movie stars, but we follow a gentleman named Richard who is in his mid to late 30s. He is a drunkard and quite the underachiever in life, but through a series of very Hitchcockian events, Richard finds himself framed as a serial sex killer who has been terrorizing women throughout the greater London community. This, I believe, is the very first film where Hitchcock was unbound by any MPA censorship.
It was the first R-rated Hitchcock film.
Yeah, and it feels in many ways like a movie outside of its time, because this was the early 70s. I believe Brian De Palma and other such directors were starting to make their ascendance. The era of the sexual thriller was coming up. And this film certainly has those elements, but at the same time feels very much like a classic Hitchcock thriller about an everyman who is going about his day and then finds himself thrust into this macabre thriller who has to go on the run for his life to prove his innocence. And I gotta say, this is not the greatest film Hitchcock has ever made, but I very much enjoyed it. I thought the gentleman who played Richard,
he was good.
Was very compelling. The fact that there were no recognizable Cary Grant types in the film gave it kind of this grounded feel. The supporting cast was great, and everyone feels like there is not that kind of movie star gloss over this movie. It has like a kind of raw, weird grittiness, at the same time having all the classic and at the same time having all the tropes of a Hitchcock thriller.
Not to disagree with you, because I did enjoy it. I guess I'm torn, because there were so many moments in this movie that I loved. Mm-hmm. Either just with comedy, or we were talking earlier about how Hitchcock just has a way of doing things that's kind of a little bit so perfect, and I only ever say that very cautiously because I think people say perfect filmmaking as kind of like a throwaway term, but there are so many scenes where you're watching it and you can just see how it kind of set the platform for future filmmakers and future films, and that was really cool to see in this, and I could see Hitchcock through this film that way. But on the other end, detaching Hitchcock from it, it felt a little bizarre to me.
Okay.
I'm just wondering if I'm leading myself
Can I segue
down a
off
hole.
of the,
Yeah,
off
segue.
the, like,
Go.
What I want to say about Hitchcock and what I enjoyed in this film is the willingness to border on cheese. And when I say cheese, I mean drawing attention to a camera choice.
Yeah.
In a way that almost could feel cliche, could feel, as you put it, too perfect. For example, there's one scene after a character's death where we see a killer walk down the stairs and exit out the door, and the camera holds on the door at an uncomfortably long time, and we see other people walk in and out of the office building who don't notice the body until we find someone we know who walks in, goes up the stairs, and we don't follow them. We hold on that door, and we wait until more pedestrians pop by, and we hear the scream. And that's when we know the body has been discovered and things are about to hit the fan. And that willingness to draw attention to the director's choices and to make the audience aware of the perspective with which they're watching the movie is really sharp, really clever, and very effective in that scene. And it's certainly something I wish there was more of today.
Because it's bold, right? And they're actually making a decision rather than settling with one. And you can see that when you're watching when you're watching a movie.
Sorry, just one more.
Go ahead.
Just to be clear, it's not style simply for the sake of style. It is a choice that is grounded in the story. It is the right choice for that scene and for that moment. It is not simply a director drawing attention to himself to say, look, I'm clever. It is, I believe this is the right choice for this moment in particular.
Right. I'm thinking about that.
Yes. Well, I also want to get to the stuff that you found uncomfortable about this movie. And would you say there was a scene, or what was the distancing effect you had?
I did really like this movie, and I think what I was kind of trying to say earlier was that Hitchcock has a very clear style that's influenced a lot of filmmaking today, and it's always really comforting watching it. At least for me, it's always really comforting watching a Hitchcock film because you can see that style, and it's nostalgic and new in all of its own ways. But specifically with this film, I had some problems story-wise with the stuff that happened, and I try as much as possible to not let my modern day.
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
Ask a question.
Yeah, go.
Because just bluntly, is this the rape scene?
Oh yeah.
Because
well,
I'll set up a little detail for anyone who has not seen the film. The killer in question is known as the Necktie Strangler, who is a sex fiend who preys on women, and it is implied either is sexually abusing them after he has murdered them or before, both of which are completely horrible. Personally, I would rather have it after I'm killed, but
necrophilia, everybody.
But the moment the killer is revealed, we are trapped in a room with him and one of the female characters of the film, and the scene holds. And the two are in conversation, and she knows something isn't right, and she wants to leave the room. She wants to get out as quick as possible, and he just, no. And the scene holds, and the discomfort is real, but I would love to hear,
I think to clarify, just to be very blunt, especially in the past year, there's just been a lot of conversation, both within the film community and, oddly enough, outside the film community about if we should watch movies that quote-unquote endorse rape. And I want to clarify right now, I'm not claiming that this movie is endorsing rape at all, but
this has a very blunt portrayal of sexual violence.
Yes. And it begs the question of, like, when I'm sitting down and watching this, I know myself and many other people that I know ask ourselves in the middle of a scene like that, is this something that we can kind of waive for the sake of film, or is this something that we need to flag as unacceptable? And it's this weird balance of where can we accept a possibly offensive scene because it's for the sake of storytelling, and where do we draw the line? And I think that was why I had a hard time with this movie. And as much as I understand that this was made in the 70s and that it was a different time, I did have a hard time from that scene onward paying attention to the movie, because all I could think about was that scene. And to kind of expand off of what you were saying, it was really unique. And I don't want to try and make it seem like I'm making one scene bigger than it actually is, because
it's a memorable scene.
It's a big scene. Yeah. Because what happens is the scene starts out, as you kind of said, it starts out and you slowly get the idea of what's happening. And at the reveal and kind of realization that there's about to be an assault, it proceeds, and normally that's when it cuts off. You maybe see a little hint of it, it starts, it's done. But it held. Watch for a few more minutes. I was thinking like, great, they're going to cut away at some point, as they always do. It held. And it held until he left the room. Yeah. And I cannot tell you the last time I've seen that in a movie. And I think because of that, that was why I had a hard time going forward for the rest of the movie, just because of how graphic it was. And it definitely altered the way I saw the rest of the movie. Which was kind of a shame, because I wanted to like the rest of the movie, and I still kind of did, because there were so many good scenes. Like there's a scene where we have the offender in a potato truck, and this kind of notable pin that he wears on his suit. He realizes, oh no, the previous victim that I had it clutched in her hand. When he disposed of the body in a potato truck, she still had it clutched in her hand. So he treks back to that potato truck, hops in the back as it's driving, and there's this whole really comedic and amazingly done scene where he's trying to get and pry this pin out of a naked woman's hand while potatoes are flying around.
It is, can I just...
Yes, go.
That scene embodies
so good.
Everything that I wish Skyscraper had
yes!
in those moments.
Yes!
Because so many little things go wrong.
It's so good. And it's all subtle, too.
Yes.
Right? And it's because...
And it's not a spectacle. It's really cheap. You could do that scene on a very minimal budget. And
Exactly. And that's... And not to kind of divert back to Skyscraper, but that's kind of the beef that I have with a lot of modern day movies, is I think people think that if you throw money at things that's going to fix the problem. And what Hitchcock did with a scene like that is he just made it simple.
Just clever, smart stuff.
Just clever, smart things. Like there's a part where the truck driver kind of stops the car and his face kind of like smashes into this naked corpse body and potatoes fly everywhere. And it's amazing. It's hilarious. Costs no money.
Really quickly,
right?
There are two very memorable scenes in this movie. One of them is the potato truck, and the other is a scene we were talking about. And I want to stay on that for a little longer, because I had similar thoughts and similar qualms with just say the efficacy of holding a camera on something like that for so long, especially considering this is a film that is not about sexual violence, because there are great films that can tackle this subject matter that I would be probably more forgiving to having a more blunt or more frank scene portraying it. This is in a lot of ways a North by Northwest type of movie with a lot more nudity and perversion and some creepy 70s stuff. At the other end, there are also, especially in the late 70s, early 80s, a lot of just very trashy style films that love to exploit the element of a woman in peril, of a woman being trapped in a room with a man,
now,
and her being just vulnerable and scared, and using that and portraying that fetishistically. This is not that scene either. There are elements of the scene that personally I didn't appreciate the choices for. Particularly, there are a couple lingering shots on some nudity during the assault that I just thought were inappropriate, and you simply wouldn't be able to do those shots today, because I think audience would just butcher you for it.
Do you think that was why it was rated R?
Well, there's a lot of nudity through the film.
Do you think it was the nudity or the content?
Both. I just don't think you can show that degree of nudity in a movie and get away with it. The subject matter certainly heightens the severity of it. But if I can just say really quickly, after thinking about the scene, there is an element that I really appreciated about it, and I think elevates it beyond cheap exploitation. And that is the fact that the woman we are trapped with is a full and complete character, and we are not simply watching her as a prop to be used for the story. She is an intelligent woman. She is sharply trying to think through a series of excuses and negotiating and trying to find a way out of this scenario. And that puts all of our empathy with her rather than the killer. Again, if you contrast that with like the low end of the 80s slasher genre, where you featured a whole bunch of women being tied up and pleading and screaming, help me, help me, help me.
Yeah.
That sort of approach is, I think, dehumanizing and anti-women, and has no interest in portraying the women other than as fetishistic objects to enjoy the suffering of. Because this woman is a character, we feel for her, and we're thinking through the steps as she is doing it, and that makes the scene even more uncomfortable and even more suspenseful, because all of our compassion is on her side of the table. We're not seeing things, literally as you would get in a lot of films, seeing things through the eye of the predator. And that, to me, is what elevates this scene, and to me, makes it redeemable, and allows me to just kind of say, yeah, see Frenzy, it is a worthwhile and empathetic movie, even if it delves into uncomfortable subject matter.
I'm actually really glad that you mentioned that, because I think you mentioned how a lot of movies at the time would preach the help me response of women during assault scenes. And I feel like that's still and has always been a problem. The amount of movies that we see now, or even just TV shows, just casual short films, anything where the depiction of assault or even harassment is just victimizing the victim more so than it needs to be is too much. And one of the things and one of the reasons why I'm having a hard time kind of figuring out how I feel about this movie is because this movie didn't do that. Didn't do what? Didn't do the victimizing of this female. Like, as you just... Let me backtrack. Let me reiterate that. I think it's interesting that you mentioned that a lot of movies at the time would over-victimize the victim.
Which is not necessarily over-victimized, but just the victim was a prop.
Right. They were a plot point to enable the assault. And
which makes me think the empathy is with the killer.
Which it is, and exactly. And that's what I'm saying. And as much as it was a prevalent problem then, it's also a problem now. And one of the reasons why I was kind of torn about how to feel about this movie, and I was swaying to the side, and I still am swaying to the side of this is probably a pretty good movie or better than average movie, is because of the fact that it did favor and properly feature the victim. And when as soon as the villain came into the room, our attention didn't divert to him. In the camera work, we held on her quite a bit. And yes, there were moments where we held on her in some areas that we probably shouldn't have been holding on. The focus was on her, and we were with her in the scene. And I feel like that lacks from a lot of movies nowadays, just as it did then. I saw recently 8th Grade, which was the new Bo Burnham movie. Yeah, I watched it last week with a friend of mine when I was in California with a friend of mine, and Bo showed up and talked about it, and because there's a similar scene that relates to assault and harassment. And long story short, this scene doesn't go full-fledged, and it doesn't go as far as it could have. And one of the questions in the audience was, why didn't it go as far as you could have? Why didn't it go, quote unquote, full rape, as some people might say? Okay. This is what they said. And he said, like, well, that's not what's needed. And I feel like, despite the fact that visually we didn't really do that in this film, character-wise, this movie did a lot of favoring. Am I making sense right now?
In a long-form way, I think, but I'm a little
in short-form way? No.
How you circle back.
No, it's not making sense.
Okay.
Let's rephrase, because I am trying to make sense. I think although this movie probably could have cut a little bit sooner than it did in some places, like when it held a little longer on her breasts or held a little longer on things that it shouldn't have been holding on, I think for the most part it did well because it favored her as a character, and it actually had her be a character, right? During the scene, we knew who she was. She wasn't a plot point. She wasn't a device. We knew her. We had already seen her before. she was a person to us. And I feel like in a lot of movies then, and especially in a lot of movies now, a lot of victim characters are, as you said, just props.
Are set up as disposable. They're set up as unlikable.
Yeah, and they're kind of, and correct me if you think I'm wrong, but I think I'm right. They're kind of fetishized.
Without question,
and that's kind of the problem that I have with a lot of scenes like that. And I was happy to see that ending the scene, she wasn't fetishized.
And there is a challenge that is inherent to film, that it almost inevitably has the effect of glorifying whatever it is portraying, even if that portrayal is meant to be satirical or a condemnation of the subject matter. A great example of this would probably be American History X, which I think is obviously a film that looks to condemn and combat and fight against racism, prejudice, bigotry. Yet at the same time, clips of that movie and still frames have become propagated and reused by alt-right groups, neo-Nazi groups, because they see the Edward Norton as cool and sexy, and why not? He's Edward Norton. He looks really cool on camera at a lot of points in that film. Twofold, when you portray a sexual assault on camera, if you are someone who, not to speak too explicitly, gets off on that sort of thing, the scene takes on an entirely new meaning and can be celebrating and embracing the thing the scene is meant to condemn. Same thing is true of war films. You can go on and on and on with this. But I felt like the film covered that material honestly, and it felt authentic in the moment. Portraying someone who is trapped in that scenario and is trying with every bit of her wit and intelligence to get away.
To kind of add on to what I was saying at the beginning of this recording about the problems that I had with this movie, I think despite the fact that there are still a lot of things that this movie, for me personally, didn't do right. There are a lot of, which we've already discussed, there are a lot of things that it did very well, which is it's just.
Is it outside of the scene that there are moments? Because there are many.
I mean that's just. No, I think the brunt of it and the most important things that didn't go well were within this scene. So it just kind of recapping what I was saying. As much as there were a lot of things in this scene, I guess, that weren't preferably for me done right, there were a lot of things that were done really well. And that outweighed. For me?
I kind of thought at the end you were coming around and saying the scene on the whole got it right, but...
Yeah, no, exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
Am I wording wrong? Okay.
I didn't know if you had additional story elements, because there is certainly, getting to the end, towards the latter half of the film...
The end of the scene, or...
No, the latter half of the film, if you want to talk about additional plot points.
Like the literal, like the last 30 minutes, or the second kind of assault scene? Well, I guess there wasn't really an assault scene.
It is completely implied. It is that descent.
It is implied. Well, and that's the thing that, and you can cut in here or wherever, but that's, I think, one of the reasons why I did kind of like this film and it did kind of turn around for me in the end was the second time that we had an assault scene, it wasn't depicted like it was before. It was different, and it was more about the silence than it was the actual visuals. And I appreciated that there was an acknowledgement of that contrast, and it wasn't just all about, let's see a victim in pain, which was really great.
I think once you show that scene once, the implication of it again with the character we know and have spent even more time with is just far more unsettling and disturbing, where you just kind of sit in the silence of that moment and go, ooh, no, she's gone, and she's gone in the worst way. There's really no need to go back and show it again.
It was really cool to see just organic and authentic Hitchcock suspense used in scenes like that.
One thing I really enjoyed about the plot of this movie, and it's true of Hereditary as well, is when you have a writer that just says, so what's the worst possible thing that can happen? And just goes, yeah, that's it, and we're going to do it. And we're going to get there really quickly, and it's not going to be the end. We're just gonna have to keep writing after that, and the movie's gonna keep going. And now that this person's lost everything, what do we do next? And I love when films are willing to take that jump and go, head first in to the bottom of the barrel, and we're gonna see if we can have our lead crawl their way back out of this.
The movie Frenzy built very nicely. It was moment after moment after moment, and just when you thought it was done and this was the worst it could ever get, it was going to get worse. And that's what kept me going. And I think, not to turn back around to Skyscraper too much just yet, but that was a problem that I had with Skyscraper, was it was really just aimless content and a building burning down, and then occasionally a funny joke. And there was nothing propelling me forward. But with Frenzy, it's a complete contrast.
You get the feeling that the writer of Frenzy had a moment where they just went, oh my gosh, what have I done? There's no way out of this. Oh well, I'm gonna drink some scotch, go to bed, come back and do some more writing tomorrow. And that's a good feeling to have when you're making a film. Just go, oh my gosh, there's no escape. Yeah. Because if you feel that, we feel that. Yeah. And Frenzy does that. Thank you so much for listening to The Boys Who Would Be Critics, and a special thank you to Morgana for joining me on the podcast. It was great having you. Because we've had a couple of technical snafus, this podcast is being uploaded very late, which means the next episode will be up in just a couple days. Again, Damoon will be away, so I am joined by my good friend Andrea to talk about Sorry to Bother You, and we're following up with Sullivan's Travels, so hopefully that'll be up within just a day or so, and then there will be new episodes shortly thereafter. Cheers, guys. Thanks.